So using the selection and the direct selection tools are probably the more confusing elements when you do start to learn Illustrator because why is Illustrator giving me two mouses? That's a bit confusing, right? Which is kind of one of the issues that I had coming to terms with when I first started using Illustrator. Um, so I'm going to give you a bit of a breakdown. So the selection tool is basically the main sort of mouse tool that you use for everything in Illustrator. So the selection tool allows you to select basically, as its name suggests, on anything, including anything in the panel and anything on your artboard. The difference between the two is usually that the direct selection tool usually interacts with elements that are on the artboard versus the selection tool, which is everything that really isn't on the artboard. So hopefully that kind of gives you a bit more of an idea. The symbolic or the visual motif is direct selection tool is white, which associates itself with, I guess, the page, and then the normal selection tool associates itself with, the darkness of its actual workspace itself. So hopefully that makes it a bit more easier. As an example, when you do draw, say for example, a shape, let's draw out a shape here. So I'll draw out a shape and then we'll draw out a bit of text. Say for example, I'm just doing like a poster or something. And say that these elements that I've got here, I'm just not happy with its position. So basically the selection tool is what allows you to just basically hover over. You can see that the cursor changes according to what you sort of hover over, and it activates in a hover state. So basically what that means is we can click on this and we can actually move things around. So say for example, I just click on the edge here, you'll activate this. This tool allows me to edit whatever I've selected, same with the rectangle shape. You can see that the cursor changes depending on what I've hovered over, but for the most part, the selection tool allows you to do most of the picking on the artboards. So I'll just undo that for a second. So what I can do here using this tool is click and drag. You can see that the cursor highlighted area is dotted, and then I'll select, and then this way you can see that the cursor's changed into like a rectangular stamp. Allows us to actually move this around, which is what it symbolizes. So you can move this left, right, up, down, however you want. When you do move things on the artboard in Illustrator, you can see that these guides sort of appear, which are purple. These are basically the smart guides that Illustrator helps you with. So say for example you've got a rectangle here that you want everything that you type here to align up against this rectangle, for example. I want to make more text here, let's just say blah blah blah. I've typed stuff here and I want to align this with the edge of the rectangle to make it all aligned. This is what it will help me to do. The selection tool allows me to actually edit windows and objects as well. It has the power to resize and reshape whatever's on the artboard. It's quite straightforward, it's pretty simple. If you go to the artboard tool, you can see that the cursor's changed because I'm not in a selection tool state. So you can usually tell if you've got this selected if your cursor has changed into something else. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. If we go back, sometimes using different modes on the toolboard won't allow you to use the selection tool, so you've got to remember to keep clicking back on the selection tool to deactivate some modes. Say for example you're using the pen tool, we're just going to add a stroke to it. So you can see the cursor's changed to a pen tool, but if I just draw, yeah, it's just going to allow me to keep on drawing, but I won't be able to stop. I'll go over this tool a bit more in a separate video, but to stop this, what I usually do is I hit V or its shortcut, which is V. which allows me to just reactivate the selection tool, and it'll stop me from drawing using the pen tool as well. When using the direct selection tool, this allows us to actually edit objects on the artboard. So say for example I pick this, and now Illustrator allows me to actually edit the curvature of these rectangles with the selection tool, but using the direct selection tool, you can see that the cursor is now changed to white. If I click on the rectangle again, this way I can actually click into an individual corner or an element of an object and edit it this way. It's probably best to use the selection tool for some of these ways of editing. It probably makes things a little bit easier if you're doing things in uniformity, but if you're looking for a bit of a fine tune, using the direct selection tool makes it a bit easier. So you can see how all of these sites have been activated, but I'm editing them all at once. If I want to just do one corner at a time, I can double click on that selection. You can see that the cursor activates itself when I've hovered over elements that I can click on. I encourage you to do a bit of experimentation and sort of get your head around the way these tools interact with each other and the way that you can edit different objects. When you are editing, say for example, you've done like a beautiful line drawing, for example, or a line art, and you want to edit the curvature of this, so for example, strand of hair, and we want to maybe smooth this out, for example. You can do that using the smooth tool, which is, I think, in here somewhere. Yeah, you can use the smooth tool, but in this instance, I'm going to use the direct selection tool, and this allows us to actually edit these anchor points. So these are the anchor points. It allows me to actually edit the anchor points. As you can see, the cursor change. So say for example I want to curve this anchor point here and make this like a nice curvy angle. If I click this here, you can see that the direct selection tool has activated this anchor point, and I can actually edit this and smooth this out at free will. Using the pen tool, for example, allows you a bit more control over the editing of this line because it's associated directly with the pen tool. But I would say to make it a bit easier and make these edits more simpler, and kind of pick up the basics of the pen tool, experimenting with the direct and the selection tools kind of make it a bit easier for you. Alright, so that's a bit of an example there. If you are using, say for example, let's just say we've maybe used the paintbrush tool and we've done like a line. Again, the direct selection tool allows you to zoom in. We'll zoom in, get a better look at this. So that's Control or Command plus. So you can see that this is a bit more complicated. The direct selection tool allows us to look at all the anchor points that we've done, and actually you can see the cursor change when we've hovered over an anchor point in this paintbrush stroke. So this way we can actually pick things. You can see the handles that are there, and we can actually edit this and move this around. This is why I say the direct selection tool is a bit more closely linked with the pen tool, but it just gives you control freedom as opposed to visual control with the pen tool, adding anchor points and doing a bit more with the stroke rather than the positioning of it. So yeah, hopefully that gives a bit more info. I don't think I've missed out anything with the selection tool. The only other thing I could probably mention is if you have a look at the top control bar when you are hovering with the selection and the direct selection tool, this doesn't really change according to, it will only change when you've selected on something and you need to edit. So for example, I'll select this. These are all related to the pen tool, which I'll go in a different video, but yeah, you can see how the direct selection tool associates itself with objects on the artboard, and then direct selection tool allows you a bit more positioning control. You can rotate, you can do different actions with the selection tool. I just encourage you to play with each of these two just to get your head around what you can and can't do.